Hi, everybody. Jeff here. Wanted to touch base with y'all about something that's so important to me and Michelle. As we enter our second lockdown, and as holiday season kicks into gear, we wanted to ask you once again to be mindful of where you spend your money. There are so many small, independent businesses here in San Francisco and the Bay Area that could really use your support, now perhaps more than ever. We know how convenient big box stores and national delivery services can be, but they're going to do just fine without us. It's our brothers and sisters here at home who need us to shop local, to keep food on our neighbors' tables, and to uplift our own community right here. And we have a great way for you to start. We're partnering with a new nonprofit started by SF students called Supply Hope Info. I mentioned them in the last podcast, but now I'd like you to hear directly from Susanna Lau and Lana Nguyen.
Hello everyone, I am Susanna Lau.
And I am Lana Nguyen.
And we are the co-founders of Supply Hope Info. We started Supply Hope Info when SFUSD called for distance learning, and as low-income students ourselves, having relied on resources from our school, Supply Hope Info was created to provide resources to other students who might not have access to them at home.
So far, we have supported 1,700 students. A majority of our focus is on the Bay Area. However, with such a strong support system from the community, we have been able to extend our impacts to California and even around the globe. We have worked to donate to Rose Haven in Oregon, Macau True Goodwill General Association, and many other organizations that support the underserved community. Supply Hope Info has been mentioned by Jennifer Newsom and featured by outlets such as SF Gate and KTSF 26.
For more ways to support us and our students, please visit our GoFundMe page or feel free to donate physical supplies to us by emailing us first. Even as simple as sharing our links can go a long way. Thank you for listening to our story.
And thanks to Stored San Francisco for supporting us.
Okay, back to the show.
It was great to have been born and raised in San Francisco, to bring it back together, because this is a city that accepts cultures, differences of opinion, and to a certain extent, I felt embraced.
That was Real City Ambassadors host Rodrigo Durán. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. I met Rodrigo when he asked me to be on his show, which I was beyond honored to do. In this podcast, Rodrigo shares the story of his parents, both of whom immigrated to the U.S. from Mexico. They met in the Mission, where Rodrigo and his siblings were born. After a brief stay in Jalisco, Mexico, with his relatives when he was 5, Rodrigo returned to San Francisco and went to school in Chinatown. His early life is the story of Aztec dancing, multicultural acceptance and inclusion, and an appreciation of the city and all it has to offer a family like his. Please join us Thursday for part 2. Here's Rodrigo.
So my dad came to San Francisco in the late 70s. He was born and raised in Mexico City.
Okay.
At the time, the whole city was up in turmoil.
I was going to say, interesting time to move here.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it happened in the late 60s, but it still kind of followed through to the next decade. And he was heavily involved in political rallies and activism at school.
Did he come here for school?
No, not
Okay.
at all. No.
Back in Mexico.
Back in Mexico,
Got
yeah.
it.
He was heavily involved. The turning point was, and he was like maybe 18 by then, 1920, was he started a rally, and it got so big that they managed to close the whole school down in Mexico City, he and his friends. Then the government sent out like troops of hooligans, right, to knock down the doors, and they just started shooting at everyone. So my dad saw a friend of him just get shot at.
Jeez.
Almost in front of him. He managed to get away, and from there on he was like, well, I'm like disillusioned, like the whole movement is kind of falling apart. The government doesn't support us, and I'm not even into school. I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. Is what he said.
Can I ask quickly,
Yeah.
what movement was he part of?
Well, just the revolutionary movement in Mexico City. It's a very progressive, liberal city, so that the atmosphere was like that, and he was part of it.
And this was
but this was in '68. During 1968, like the La Matanza, he was in his roof because they lived close to downtown or El Centro. So he and his siblings saw as the tanks were coming in.
Jeez.
That was in '68, so he was younger.
Right.
But as he grew older, he got more politically involved.
Right.
So yeah, he just didn't know what he was gonna do with his life. So one day he told my grandma that he was just gonna go travel up north. Eventually, he's like, "No, I'm actually going to the U.S." So then my dad leaves, and there's a little funny story. Like my grandma just passed away a year ago.
I'm sorry.
She, as the days passed by, every time she saw a plane, she would like do the cross sign. Every plane. My dad took a bus. He did not fly a plane. He took a bus, and he had like a student visa, so he managed to make it over here.
Okay.
But he landed first in L.A. Mind you, he didn't know anyone over here. He didn't have family over here.
And traveling alone, not with friends, or
no, by himself. Okay. He made it out by himself. Okay. He was homeless in L.A. He lived on the streets, and a Guatemalan buddy told him from folks that he met, like, "Hey, there's a lot of work in San Francisco." My dad's name's Francisco, so he's like, "Oh, maybe that's an omen, right? This is probably the place I have to go." And so that's how he ended up in San Francisco, was through word of mouth. Loved the city, and he decided he wanted to stay here. So that's my dad's story.
Have you ever talked to him about what the city was like for him when he arrived?
Vibrant, I mean, to say the least.
Yeah.
He was into the lowrider culture.
Nice.
But he's a funny. He was a misfit within the lowrider culture. And what I mean by that, it's like the lowrider culture is always like a second generation Latino, Mexicano, Chicano. Right. And my dad's fresh from the border and like speaking only Spanish, so he would be playing like Mexican rancheras and corridos in his lowrider while everyone's playing like boogie nights and all kinds of funk music. But then my dad obviously loved the music in general.
Yeah.
But that was his scene for a bit, was the lowrider scene. So he lived on Alabama, and yeah, it was dangerous. There was a lot of movement happening down in Alabama in terms of drugs. But, in that whole atmosphere, there's a lot of love. There's a lot of good people. And he felt welcome. He was welcomed not only by the Mexican community, but the Central American community.
Okay.
Probably more by the Central American community because within Mexico, if you're from Mexico City, there's a stigma. You're a Chilango, and, they think bad about you. You do all kinds of deals, and you hustle people out. So there was that stigma because there weren't a lot of people from Mexico City at the time. Right. They were all from like northern central Mexico. Okay. And so he actually really bonded with like Nicaraguenses mainly, and then Guatemalans, Puerto Ricans. But then, then again, it's San Francisco. There's a lot of Mexican Americans. So that was kind of his circle. Okay. Just kind of growing up, well, not growing up, but living here in the beginning in San Francisco. My mom's story is completely different. It's like the complete opposite. All right. She's from a small town in the state of Jalisco. Okay. And my family members of my grandfather had gone up north to the U.S. through the Bracero Program. Okay. Right? 40s, 50s. But none of her immediate family. And then eventually, like in the 80s, early 80s, he came to the U.S., my grandfather. Okay. That's a whole story in and of itself. But he made it here, was here for a bit, and then decided to bring my mom, who's the oldest of 10.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah. So at the time...
The oldest overall or the oldest girl?
The oldest overall of 10.
Okay, wow.
So she's 15. They were really living through poverty. Like, there's different types of poverty, right? Sure. It's all relative. Like, my dad was also living through poverty, like in an urban setting with like vecindades being like projects basically.
Right.
So
Services and whatnot.
Yeah, you can say that. So it was a different type of poverty. Like my dad like didn't have to eat sometimes, so you get a tortilla, you put salt, or you get like a piece of bread and you put a banana, and like that's all you ate for 2 meals, for example.
Right.
Just as in my mom's case, it was a different type of poverty because it's rural
Mm.
and it's a small town in the middle of nowhere. So, I mean, everyone was poor too. So, for her, it was like eating freaking pumpkin for months.
Oh, wow.
And she hates pumpkin now.
Right.
Yeah, she would not touch pumpkin because of that.
Oh, man.
So there was that deep set of poverty, wearing the same clothes. Like, so she saw it and she wanted to leave, and so she did. And that was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to my mom's life. Being 15, like, holy shit, I just got accepted to the Olympics?
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna cross the border?
Right.
And so so it ends up being my grandpa, my uncle, and my mom.
Okay.
They go up.
Was it your mom and your uncle's choice, or was your grandfather like,
It was my
you guys
grandma.
are good?
Not my
Oh, your grandma?
Oh, my grandma is the one. She's the
Get
mover
out
and
of here.
shaker.
Yeah.
She was like selling all the cows, and they were running out of stock.
Okay.
Like livestock to sell in order to pay the coyote, because my grandpa had been deported like 2 or 3 times, so it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But this time they're like, we just got to do it. We're gonna go broke. So let's do it. So they go, and there's a story where like my mom, they're waiting right at the border. There's like a little hill, and they're like kind of like waiting there, and they can't cross because there's a lot of border patrol. So they end up sleeping and staying there overnight. And at like 5 a.m, they were awakened by sprinklers because it was like the farmer was there. So they were like all running around, kind of getting all their stuff together. They picked up some food, and they decided, okay, we gotta get the fuck out. We're soaked, we're drenched, we're not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom says she saw the border and the wall, and something got into her, and she just started climbing. And as she climbed down, she like ripped part of her dress, and they got caught, and all the luggage got mixed up, and my grandpa ended up getting my mom's luggage. And as they going through customs or like the border patrol, they open the luggage and they look at my grandpa like, yo, what are you wearing out here? So he's like blushing, and like my mom's laughing, but it's not a laughable moment. But you know, she found like joy in that. So they move over here. They end up finding a way to coming back. And yeah, so she started working at 15 to sustain a family of 10 down there.
And did they come to San Francisco, or?
Yeah, so they knew of because my grandpa had been to San Francisco, had
Already.
relatives that had known San Francisco.
Okay.
So he had already like a support system.
Yeah.
And a base. And so my mom started working. She was like a nanny, and yeah, my parents both met here.
Was that around the
Yeah.
same time that your dad moved, late 70s?
Yeah, so my mom was in the 80s, my dad was like
80s.
70s.
Okay.
But they met here in South San Francisco.
Do you know where? Do you know that
Yeah,
story?
well, yeah, I don't know the exact place. I just know there's a tortilla spot in South San Francisco. And my mom was working there.
Uh-huh.
And a guy that my mom was working with knew my dad. And then my dad would pick up the homie, and then would see my mom. So my dad would come in as a lowrider and like try to impress and flex and whatnot.
Yes.
And so that's kind of how it started. And then my mom ended up working at El Farolito.
Oh.
Right here, El Faro on
far on Folsom.
the one on Folsom and
Folsom
20th.
20th. Yeah.
So that's where she then started working, and then it was closer to my dad because he lived on Alabama.
Right.
So that's kind of how they hit it off.
Their worlds just kept
Yep.
crisscrossing.
Yep.
And
So then,
do you know who pursued who?
oh, it's my dad for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my dad. Yeah, I know.
You're like, he's still pursuing to this day.
No, actually, they're separated.
There we go. Okay.
And then like goes to show, like, man, they had, I don't know, I mean, they fell in love, but they came from 2 very distinct worlds.
Right. That's what I was going to ask about next.
And it played a big part as they grew together and then had family, like my brothers. So we're 4.
Okay.
And I think a lot of those, there were different values. And then just the love gets lost somewhere, and eventually now they parted ways. My dad lives here on 20th and Cap, where
nice.
I kind of grew up here in the Mission.
Yeah.
My mom lives in Oakland.
Okay.
So actually, I lied. I have been raised in Oakland as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's been this like it's been between San Francisco, Oakland, and Mexico.
Cool.
That's kind of been like the trifecta.
Yeah. So when you were born, did they have a place over here in the Mission, or?
Yeah. So at the time, I believe it was somewhere in Guerrero.
Okay.
Like 19th and Guerrero.
So we must be talking like your very, very early years.
Yeah, but I don't remember the early years because my older brother, so he's 34.
Okay.
Then I have a younger sister who's 29. We were sent to live in Mexico.
Okay.
In my mom's small town. God, I still don't even know the real reason. It could have been like what was happening with their marriage. It could have been economic, or they just, their dream was always to go back to Mexico.
Right.
Like a lot of immigrants, especially Mexicans, because they're so close.
Mm-hmm.
Their dream is to make money here and then invest over there. So they bought a house over there. They were looking at starting a business.
This was in Jalisco.
In Jalisco,
where your mom's from.
Yeah, where
okay.
my mom's from.
Got it.
My dad and my mom, they were married. That was the goal.
Okay.
And then to eventually buy a house in Guadalajara, which they did. So they were really they were dreaming of building a life in Mexico.
Right on.
So they sent us there, and I was 5, and I lived there for about a year and a half.
You must remember that.
So that's my first memories are in like little town Mexico.
Okay.
Where I was just like running around, killing lizards. Sorry, anyone out there that's
as you do.
Killing lizards, like learning how to like ride bulls and horses. I fell off a horse. So a lot of my first memories were there, and then I moved back to San Francisco.
Okay.
When I was about 6.5.
Were you raised bilingual or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Funny that you mentioned bilingualism. The reason we came back was because at the time, what was that? 1995, 6. There's propositions here in California where we're talking about. Well, first, banning bilingualism in schools,
right.
And then second, there was the fear of like stripping away citizenship from children that were born here of immigrant families,
which is totally illegal.
Well, it's still happening, right? So then my mom was fearful and brought us back again because of that, and so we came back. So we were raised in a bilingual household. Mm-hmm. I would say, I mean, both of them did, but my dad was the one that emphasized to make. He always re-emphasized to speak Spanish at home, and then I think what helped was also our upbringing here. My dad, when my older brother was born, got involved in the Aztec dance community.
Okay.
And so there's a photo of my mom pregnant with me. So I was born in July, and this was in May. So
89?
89.
Okay.
On a float with her Aztec dance regalia, and like pregnant with me.
Damn.
And so that's another side story of my relationship with Carnival San Francisco.
Right.
And now I work there, which is full circle, right? So my dad has been part of the Aztec dance community, which is really, it's a small niche of folks that, really not only encourage, but their lifestyles around preserving culture. Cultures that bit before, the Spanish conquest. But with that came like this pride in just your language, pride in what you look like, pride, and that's really deep in the Latino community, because my dad is super brown, dark-skinned Mexican. My mom is super white, light-skinned, like amiga right here.
Yeah.
Like, but and then there's that whole like colorism in Mexico, and then you add the American culture to the mix, and you end up with people that are lost.
Right.
Not only are they lost within the American culture, but they're lost within their Mexican culture.
Right.
Because they don't really know where they are, period. First of all, because of two borders. And second of all, because they don't understand the racial tensions that exist. Because it's something you don't speak about.
Right.
But it was always spoken at home.
Okay.
Like when you look at someone that's dark-skinned, you associate them with dumb. That's usually how people in Mexico perceive them. Or poor, or X, Y, and Z.
Right.
acknowledge that and know that that exists. And then when
Right.
you see something like this, how do you perceive that? So, my dad was always, and the Aztec dance community was always one that challenged certain norms that were
prevalent.
prevalent and that stigmatized people
Yeah.
of color.
Right.
Right.
So would you say you were sort of raised in that more accepting and accepting of cultural diversity?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we're all here, but we're all of these different cultures and we're from different places. But
Yeah,
let's
and
find
it was
something.
it's been a crazy experience, and I say that because, you grow up thinking how normal you are,
Right.
and then as I went to middle school and then high school, I wasn't Catholic.
Right.
I was never baptized.
Okay.
And that's a lot. That means a lot to in the Mexican culture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're like, oh, you're not baptized, so you must be Seventh-day Adventist, and you're waiting to be 16 years old. Or like, no, I'm not Christian.
Okay.
Like, this I don't have a religion per se, but it's a spiritual practice. Closer to Buddhism, you can say. It's like a lifestyle. And so it was so hard for me to then realize that no, I was brought up differently as well.
Right.
And then had I not had a really good sense of who I am and where I come from, I could have been lost as well.
Right.
It's like, where do I fit in? So much that my mom once said, as I like 20 something years old, she's like, "Mijo, I wish you were Christian." And because then her family is it's a mix.
They're Catholic.
She's Christian, Seventh-day
Christian.
Adventist.
Okay, got it.
And sometimes Catholic. It's a mix, right? So it's
Well, you
crazy.
mentioned 10 kids, so I was like, they got to be Catholic.
They're all Catholic. They're actually Christian, Seventh Day. That's another enchilada.
Yeah.
But what my mom said was like, "I wish you were Christian," and I'm like, "What do you mean by that?" It's like, well, it's gonna be harder when you try to get married,
Okay.
and it's true,
Okay.
right? Because I don't have any upbringing on like what it's like to be a Catholic or a Seventh Day or Baptist, so on and so forth. So it did play a role. Sometimes finding someone that could accept my values, because I can accept others' values, maybe because as being like the minority, you just learn to adapt and accept.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority, even in Catholicism and Christianity, like that was another thing I had to navigate as an adult.
Right.
I didn't think about it, but then So it was great to have been born and raised in San Francisco, to bring it back together.
Yes.
Because this is a city that accepts cultures, differences of opinion, and to a certain extent, I felt embraced
Right.
in the mission.
Right.
Because I did see Aztec dancers parade down like Carnival or at different ceremonies. So I saw myself reflected on folks that were doing something that was normalized in the mission. So I didn't feel like an outcast completely, even when I went to study in San Diego and when I left the country. I knew where I was from and I knew the value that I had, thanks to San Francisco and the mission.
And would you say pretty much your entire life you felt that?
Yeah.
Yeah, from the beginning.
Yeah, from the beginning. Yeah.
So let's go back to you're born in '89, and around 5 or so you went to Mexico.
Yeah.
Let's talk about coming back.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories of that? So coming back to like mid '90s,
Yeah.
San Francisco.
Yeah.
Because there must have been a little contrast, I was gonna say a contrast in your little mind.
Yeah.
Meaning you were young.
No,
your mind was not little.
No, that's okay. It was a mind fuck, and I say this because
Right? There was a contrast.
Well, here it goes. We show up in the middle of the school year, and we move to the mission, and all the schools here were full. The ones in the mission that were predominantly Latino, and the only school that would take us was in Chinatown.
Okay.
So I went to, back then it was called Commodore Stockton, and then while I was there, it was renamed Gordon J. Lau. So it's in the heart of Chinatown on Grant,
Okay.
I believe. And so my first day of school after coming from Mexico, basically, I mean, I was placed in the bilingual program, but everyone's Chinese, basically.
Right.
There's one classroom, and we all kind of graduated to the next, like, school year together because we were the only Latinos there. And so that was another culture shock. On top of like now I have to speak English.
And the other kids are speaking Cantonese.
Cantonese,
Yeah.
and yeah, mainly Cantonese. So I was like, what's going on? You know what I mean? So I had to learn real quick how to say thank you, please, and fuck you
Yeah.
in Cantonese, you know, so I can gain their respect
Yeah.
and appreciate it. But, you know, needless to say, like, I had a really good experience there because, again, you know, we celebrated Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year.
Right.
And so I was exposed to
Yet another culture.
Another culture.
Yeah.
And then I saw a lot of the values in that culture with, I'll never forget for, like Hispanic Heritage Month, my dad came to perform
Oh.
in Chinatown to represent the Latinos.
Nice.
So that was a huge sense of pride to see my father, you know, being acknowledged, right, in a predominantly Chinese school. And then, you know, we always in a lot of Aztec dance group they do the friendship dance, la danza de la amistad, where you know you create a circle and the main dancer is showing them steps, and so there I am seeing my peers Latino and then mainly Chinese coming together in a circle.
Nice.
And then doing a dance around and creating these beautiful figures and just really joining in celebration of culture.
So cool.
So I feel really blessed and privileged when I say I'm San Franciscan, because I've gone to experience some points. I can't say all of them and I envy those. I know some folks that really, really have been.
You're working on your buy 9 get 1 free card.
But yeah,
you're forgiven.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And so that was my experience in elementary school, learning some Cantonese.
Can I ask how you still lived over here
Yeah.
in the Mission?
Yeah, so we took a bus.
Did you take me any?
No.
Okay.
There was a
school
bus, a
bus.
school bus,
Okay.
that picked us up on 20, where Moscone is right now, on 20th and, 20th and Harrison, 21st and Harrison.
Okay.
That was a crazy ride. I remember it, I think it was mainly there was like a black lady that picked us up, and she was always tuning into the freshest jams that she shouldn't have, because it had all the, you know, the DMX, the 400 Degrees, all the hip hop hits were hitting, like the thong song. She would
Totally.
blast it, and we're like, I'm 4/5, like, what is this thong song? And she would just drive so quickly, you know, maybe I don't know why, but we get there, and I remember that fondly. Just taking the bus to school and back.
Did you, as a kid, at any of these early ages, like elementary school, maybe middle school, did you and maybe your friends or your siblings, did y'all get around town? Did you go like to different parts of town? Did you go downtown?
No.
You did most of your stuff, like you hung out in the Mission.
No.
No.
Yes and no. So through Aztec dance, my dad would travel a lot, and he would take us with him. So when it wasn't, but you're right, in San Francisco, it was mainly the Mission.
Okay.
And the only times when we weren't in the Mission in San Francisco, it was for an Aztec dance performance. So sometimes we'd be in the Bayview, sometimes we would be in downtown, and we were just like popcorning throughout the city performing. And then other times it'd be like in Sacramento, you know, and we'd go as far south as Los Angeles, San Diego, because they have ceremonies and performances, right? So my experience growing up wasn't only in the Mission. It was all over the place, but in little spaces, mainly like indigenous, Native American, Mexican, spaces all throughoughout.
And were you performing with your dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was the whole thing.
I knew that.
It was the whole thing. All of us had our little regalia with feathers, and, you know, half naked dancing under the sun.
Yeah.
And it's not until I got older that I like really appreciated and saw the value in learning, knowing what it's like to be thirsty, for example. You know, we take for granted that we have water right here and that I can drink it right now. But when it comes to a ceremony, you can't just grab water whenever you want. You really have to wait after 2 hours, maybe, if they pass water or fruit. So, you know, you just come to realize some of the privileges that people have in general.
Right.
Just water, for example. Being tired, you know. But then always like feeling accomplished. Whether it be a 20-minute performance or a 3-hour ceremony under the sun, you feel accomplished when you finish something. So
Fulfillment?
Oh yeah.
Sense of fulfillment.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, for sure. So that was really like my upbringing.
That was Rodrigo Durán. On the next episode of Storied San Francisco, Rodrigo will talk about his time in Brazil, as well as his return to the city and his work with Calle 24 Latino Cultural District. Please join us for part 2 on Thursday. Music for Storied San Francisco is by Otis McDonald. Photography is by Michelle Kilfett. The show is hosted and produced by me. Michelle and I have produced more than 130 episodes over the last 3 years, and you can find them all at our website, storiedsf.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where you can like, comment, and share the stuff we put out. Find the podcast just about everywhere you can listen, including, most recently, BFF.FM's new podcast network. Please subscribe to stay up to date on all the content we publish. We love feedback, so if you have any, our email is storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. Stay strong, stay safe, and stay healthy.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.